All right, so we're going to continue here with the Q&A session for patients and experts. So if we can just make our way back to the to have a seat here. I think this is an important session because it's really for the patients have asked questions and they have a chance to ask more questions where the experts here can address those questions. So I'm going to start with a few questions that we just got fresh off the presses from the parallel meeting, the patients meeting, and I'm hoping that some of the specialists here can answer some of these questions. This patient, first question from a patient was, how often do I need to, so this aniridia obviously, how often do I need to check my eye pressure? So can any of the clinicians here experienced with measuring this? I'm thinking about Peter first.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I guess it depends if you have glaucoma or not. So if you don't, and you have a person who's at risk, obviously a young child with aniridia, we usually recommend about every 6 months or so. In the ideal world, I've talked to some folks here that check every 3 months, which is fine. Maybe a little bit less likely to miss something. Maybe a year might be a little bit much. So we usually recommend about every 6 months. Now, if you have glaucoma, obviously there will be periods where more frequent examinations are pertinent and appropriate, but the clinician will help guide that a little bit. Like if the pressure's a little high and you're not sure if a drop is working yet or whatever, you can make an earlier appointment. Maybe it'll be a month, before you check it. But I think in general, for a person unaffected with glaucoma but is at risk, particularly in aniridia, we usually recommend about 6-month intervals.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, another question here was, a year ago during a consultation, my ophthalmologist discovered I had a wound on my cornea, but I felt no pain and therefore didn't know it. How come why couldn't I feel that wound?
Well, the sensitivity of the cornea is also affected, as we showed. So this is a dangerous situation, as you don't feel it, and it can get worse. But the blurriness that gets worse can also be a sign of a sore that doesn't heal.
Yeah. Okay, great. So you're referring to the neurotrophic deficit that can be present in many of the aniridia patients, which may mean that they don't have that sensory input to feel the pain, and also perhaps this blurriness or vision. Maybe the vision already was compromised, and it may not be easy for them to even notice that part. So that could be why they didn't know. And then a question here. During the last Aniridia conference in Alicante, a doctor told me my lens was dislocated or subluxed, and recommended an operation. My ophthalmologist, who is a lens specialist, however, says that there are considerable risks about this. Should I have the operation or not? Of course, there are very many particular factors about the particular case and patient that we don't know here. Is there anyone that could give maybe some general sort of advice? And we're talking about maybe generally about cataract operation in aniridia.
I think that you should listen to your ophthalmologist, because reading papers before we did our fibrosis stainings at sections of persons who needed to undergo corneal transplantation, then we could see in other persons' work that these problems in the cornea, they actually started after that you have removed your cataract. So if you have a lens that is still in the eye and you can fix it with spectacles, the vision and so on, I think you should listen to your ophthalmologist.
I agree. And then another thing, the whole eye should be considered. Actually, while taking in, no matter what the present question is, if it's concerning the cornea only, if it's concerning the pressure, if it's concerning the cloudiness of the lens. Each time you are evaluated with focus on one part of the eye, the ophthalmologist should never forget the other parts. And you as a patient can also and should also ask, can this affect my cornea or my pressure or my retina or whatever in a negative way? And how big are the risks in comparison to the benefit that I may get from this treatment? And the surgery in the aniridic eye is always a risk procedure. Doesn't mean that it should never be done, of course, but it should be considered as a risk procedure, not for only that part of the eye, but the eye as a whole.
The rest of the condition of the eye, yes, thank you.
And I'm also thinking about the example that our Polish colleague told us yesterday. Don't go to a specialist who is very subspecialized in surgery.
Yeah.
Think that, yeah.
If it goes back to the same, yes, exactly. Yeah, that is Bogman.
We do, and what is our recommendation to patients? Because we always do the recommendation to go to another university clinic from Poland. Is the closest one is Hamburg, actually. So many Polish is coming as well to listen the second opinion, but usually the same. But we are working on something like this risk factor formula, and we try to estimate which is higher risk of potential good things to the patient. So I think it's always not the same, and every case is different. So, but we need to be really careful.
And I think also we get from that is also that, I mean, if you're getting advice from someone that is a doctor that has seen many aniridia patients before, you know, that is a very important advice that you get, and that a second opinion from someone who doesn't have that experience with aniridia patients really should be considered in a different way, because it's really in the first hand those who have had experience with patients with aniridia.
You have already said this, but it's very important not to forget the phobia and those problems, because the patient can never see better. And I think sometimes that is forgotten.
So those were the questions that we had that came from outside. So, but the floor is open to other questions that that you may have while the experts are here. Are there any other questions?
So this question was maybe addressed to the panel before the break, but it is available for everyone. I admire the work of those of you who dedicate their time to study in the laboratory, which is a big deal, to raise the mice and observe them and everything. Maybe it would be a good idea to have, in this context, with many scientists, also a representative of a medical company, to see what work is developed for this disease, related to the cost of the medicine developed and so on, because we can reach conclusions in these meetings, but the commercial part isn't involved, let's say, to see what is it behind the medicine developed. That was my idea. Thank you.
No, I think that's a very good point, to get this, to have the input at that stage from the companies, from the pharmaceutical companies, and also to have that transitioning to a better transition to clinical trials. And I can say that we already are starting to have some companies interested in this for either drug repurposing or drug development. So this is starting, but yes, I agree, we can definitely have more interaction with companies. Yeah.
I think it's very important to have interaction with the companies, but we must be aware that they are interested in the profit. They need the profit. I think that actually we should have our authorities with us, because we need to have these very special, very expensive treatments for a few patients. And I understand that companies cannot, they cannot be responsible, and they are not for that in a country. So we need our authorities to understand.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
That
make
the
it easy
challenge,
to-
the challenge is also of the rare disease, and that it's
Yeah.
going to be a small number of patients and so forth. Yeah, but I mean, the companies are working with authorities as well, so that is helping. I mean, those dialogues are happening. But yes, we need the regulatory understanding as well.
Yeah, like I keep the same question since last conference, what we can do with the vascularization of cornea. It's like very challenging, and especially in teenage age, I think, with it start to be more aggressive. So any ideas for you all doctors? It's like a very big problem since we don't know what to do right now.
I mean, what we've heard about a little bit today, and from the group in Cologne, for example, that there are some treatments that can precondition the cornea to regress the vessels, and this hasn't been tried yet in aniridia, but it's going to be tried very soon. Not only that, but there are some new drugs, and we even have a company here that's representing one of the new drugs that is also targeting vessels, and this is also something in the near future that we're going to be trying also in aniridia patients. So there are things happening here, and I think it's good, and it's important to communicate to the patient community that this is really something that is on our radar, and we are really trying to work for, and there are developments, as you can hear here, that are happening. So I don't know if anyone else wants to add to that, but yes, thank you.
If you are trying a scleral lens and you have no sensitivity on the cornea, do you think you could try, or it's dangerous? She can hurt her eye?
Okay, yeah. So as the cornea has less sensitivity because it's an aniridia cornea, that was the question. Would scleral lenses be appropriate, or could it potentially damage? Could we have the microphone?
Thank you. This is really important to think about. Scleral lenses are actually sometimes used because of that particular reason. So that can be a treatment for neurotrophic cornea, meaning cornea without any sensation. But of course, then you have to be really meticulous in controlling and knowing the risks with it. So no, it's not a contraindication, the opposite. It can actually be indication by itself, but it should, and the treatment, actually, the treatment, but it should be controlled meticulously by someone that has the experience.
Thank you.
So I would say the same thing, and to add that, yeah, I think we would both agree that probably the fit is very important for avoiding the problems, and once you have a good fit, and that's it takes a skilled person to be able to do that well, then the actual use of the lens can be therapeutic, and it's a positive. So I think to avoid problems, maybe just try to do as much as you can to get a good fit.
Yep. Great, thank you. There's a question up here in the front row. Oh, yeah, we can take the one in the back row first. Yeah, go ahead. So Solvi, go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you a question that might be quite challenging in many ways, but I think it's important. This is in the genetic field. As we know, we find our partners. People with vision loss, some of us find other partners with vision loss. Aniridia persons might marry and get children with persons with other genetic diseases that gives visual handicaps. What are your experiences? How could that affect? I think this is a challenging question, but I think it's good to talk about it. I think someone has to ask the question, because I've never heard so many people talking about this.
Okay.
So I think this would should be something we should be aware of, even though the answer might not be what we want.
Thank you for Solvi for bringing that up. And we were having discussions here, informal discussions about genetic counseling in the different countries, and the importance of genetic counseling, and also the potential for more severe phenotypes in those kind of situations. So does anyone have anything to add about that, or can you say anything about the genetic counseling maybe in the place where you are, or I don't know if we have the geneticists still here. I don't think so. Anything more to add? But it is really a very important and can be difficult discussions to have with the patients. But yeah.
Another thing is if two patients with aniridia meet, what will happen then?
I mean, we all know. I think we all know and realize that if there's two sort of PAX6 aniridia mutations that are inherited, so I mean one from the mother and one for the father, then there will not be a viable child that's born. So I think most of us all know that. We were discussing about some of the other mutations in other genes that are not PAX6, and that these could these would result in a viable a child and a baby, and that person can grow up, but likely that it will be a very severe phenotype in those cases, and that can present with challenges, many challenges as well. And so I think this is also a part of the whole picture with genetic counseling and how this is important. And also it ties back to our discussion on the first day and a little bit on the second day as well about aniridia or PAX6 aniridia as a syndrome, because we actually don't know a lot about what will happen if there's PAX6 mutations and non-PAX6 mutations, and if these are present, if there is a child born from parents with these two different genotypes, what will happen systemically? We don't have that kind of really information, and so there are a lot of question marks. There's a lot of unknowns there, and again, coming back to the need, for the genetic counseling in this as well, very, very important. Question.
Hi, I just have a question. I've seen some research on it. I'm from the UK, and I was wondering if there's a direct link between auditory processing disorder and aniridia, and is it like isolated, or can it co-occur with aniridia, like symptoms like essential tremors, memory issues, and so on?
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna maybe redirect that to Jim if he can address that.
So that's a great question. The auditory processing occurs in some people with aniridia. It's likely due to small changes in how the two parts of the brain are talking to each other. Auditory processing can occur in people that do not have aniridia as well, but it tends to be a different gene that's involved in that. Did I answer your question well enough, or did I miss it?
And also, just to reiterate, we're still learning more about this, and I think that's why research in this area is so important and has to continue. There was a question over here, yeah.
Yep, thanks. This is more of an open question, I guess, to patients and experts, anyone who has had experience with electronic glasses in aniridic eyes, such as eSight or anything else that's out there. Just welcome any comments on that.
Any experience with this? No? Doesn't seem to be. No. No, not from the patient side or the others. Yeah. Question. Yes. Comment.
My daughter tried the eSight glasses, and they were not very helpful for her. And we had a discussion with the team at Oxford, and they suggested that aniridic eye might not benefit with those glasses there, so we didn't go ahead with it.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for your sharing your experience. Any more questions? We have a question here. Yeah.
It has been mentioned a couple of times that maybe ophthalmologists should not consider visual acuity always as the criterion of success.
Yeah.
But I find this a bit vague. So, what should this mean concretely? I can imagine a trade-off maybe between vision and eye pain, but what else?
Yeah. All right. Is there someone who wants to?
So for the clinical trials for, I've forgotten what it is, Leber's congenital amaurosis, they put in place a maze that the children had to walk through, and they measured the speed. And in that maze, very small differences in, counting fingers or a little bit more, which seems so minor to the FDA, reflected in the ability of the children to walk through the maze and not trip over things and find their way by themselves and stuff. And it was very convincing to the FDA in the United States that this had a benefit for the patients. Whereas the difference between a very low vision and not very low vision didn't seem very beneficial. So that's, I think, what we're talking about, is putting a functional assay that obviously reflects an improvement in vision, but even a subtle improvement of vision could give a functional change. Yeah.
I think that's a very, very important point. And I think this goes back to the discussion on sort of lived experience as being really important, and that we have to really kind of take that into account as well. There may be benefits that go beyond just something that can be measured easily. And so, I think all of this is really important to take into account in the dialogue between the doctor and patient as well, when they have the conversations about what are your expectations, with a treatment, and what can you reasonably expect to happen after this, and what is meaningful for you as an outcome. I think those broader considerations really have to be taken into account. So, and that's what I think we've seen presentations here on quality of life, and other aspects of the primary vision disorder. But I think those aspects really have to take more space, I think, in the medical context. So, thank you for bringing that up. Any more questions from? Yes, one over here. James.
With apologies for being stereotypical, this is the obligatory artificial intelligence question. Is AI machine learning being used in research or a treatment diagnosis setting at all? I've heard about some sort of machine learning for identifying potential uses of existing drugs, for example. Slightly tongue-in-cheek, I suggested to someone yesterday that you could get an AI robot to maybe handle the culture of cells rather than a researcher having to do it every single day. But yeah, I was interested to know what potential is there for AI, not just with aniridia, but more generally in terms of the research and treatment space.
I think it would take quite some time to summarize that, but I can say that it is being used in research, but it also is making the transition to clinical use. And I think ophthalmology is really an area that has enormous potential for AI, and it's being started to be tapped for ophthalmology. And this goes to diagnosis, for example, and a lot of this is images. And in ophthalmology, we use images for a lot of different things. And this is perfect for AI because it can see in a way that we can't see. And I think we're going to be seeing more and more of this. So diagnosis of disease with even existing, images and image databases, prediction of development of disease as well is also coming. And I mean, just to give an example about that, using fundus pictures from the back of the eye, people have developed AI models that can, for example, predict the risk of developing Alzheimer's disease or dementia, for example. And this is just going to continue more and more in the future. So it can be using the eye as a window to the rest of the body, but also using the eye for the eye's own sake to be diagnosing and prognosis for eye diseases. So I think we're going to see more and more about this, and even applications that we can't imagine today. But it's being used definitely in research right now, and it's slowly making its way into the clinic. So I think there's really good reason for optimism there. If there's anyone else that can add something, yeah.
It's a great question, and I think I can just speak from back here. It's a great question, and you make the point that we can diagnose certain things with it, and it has come to clinic for certain things. We use it a lot for diabetic retinopathy already, for screening images for that. But more to the point, glaucoma is rapidly being incorporated now into clinical practice, and one of the challenges is that maybe you have aniridia. That can be spotted pretty quickly, but even by a simple human. But sometimes there are sophisticated issues with the diagnosis of some of the conditions that aniridics are susceptible to. So glaucoma is a good example. AI-assisted diagnosis will be useful for glaucoma, for example, because if you have challenges interpreting the intraocular pressure because there's increased corneal thickness, you have to capture images, and then you can actually see what the nerve and what the visual fields are doing. That AI-assisted diagnosis may be critically important because you have to decide at some point what is your threshold for starting therapy. Sometimes there are some gray zones there, and AI is proving to be very useful for that. So I think that you'll see, maybe not an aniridia per se, maybe there will be something directly to assess that, but some of the conditions that aniridics are susceptible to will be very, there will be a very significant impact from AI, and there already is.
Thank you. Thanks. I can also add to that at the ARVO meeting this year, where we were seeing some abstracts about not only images but text, and using these large language models, part of AI that that ChatGPT uses, but now being applied to text and information about the eye and ophthalmology and even medical records. And I think that's also going to grow over time, so that we can get more support, decision support for doctors, and examining thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions of cases, and then trying to draw some experience and conclusions from those. So I think that's also a very interesting area.
I'm a mom of an 8-year-old, so for a number of reasons, screen use is a topic in our house. She does have some dry eye symptoms. But I also know that she uses, because she's quite low vision, 20/500 roughly, she uses it as a tool too. But she's also 8 and she likes, entertainment and games and things like that. So is there any kind of guideline for what is too much screen use, and to balance that with how she uses it as assistive tech throughout her life?
A very good question. And I think also that's a broader question. I mean, for children, very important, but also for adults. And we know that from our surveys, for example, we know that many people with aniridia are using cell phones, mobile devices, and assistive devices, and screens as well. Potential risks. I'm thinking about Tor Utheim here. Maybe he can say a few words about this. Sorry to put you on the spot. Over there.
So just repeat.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
So we have a mother here of an 8-year-old who is using screens, and thinking about aniridia and about dry eye, and screens are also necessary for there's assistive technologies to be able to interact in many ways in our modern society. So what would kind of are the risks and advice would you sort of give for this?
Okay, I just wanted to be 100% sure I answer the right question here, and it's a very important question by all means. We live in a modern society. Screen use is part of our lives. And there is a risk with regard to the development of dry disease, in particular watching screens. There are some pieces of advice I can give. First of all, to lower the screen so that you have a small aperture, not wide open eyes. And then to reduce screen time, but that may be easier said than done. So at least take some breaks and then try to look somewhere far. And most importantly, to blink during those breaks. And if you remember, blink during screen time as well. There are also some animation programs reminding the users to blink. Yeah, maybe 2 more pieces of advice if you have time for that.
Yes, please.
Yeah, anti-glare can be another advice. Try to avoid reflections if possible, and also try to have light from the screen that is more or less similar to the surroundings. That's also beneficial.
What would you say about the brightness of the screen? Could that be
yes,
important?
Exactly. So there are studies advising the users to reduce the brightness. There is some controversy regarding blue light, but some studies indicating that it may be smart to reduce the emission of blue light. At least I do so, as you can imagine. These glasses, I have some others, but I have blue filtering glasses just to be on the safe side. Why not?
Yeah.
Yes.
And does your child use lubricating eye drops or artificial tears? I mean, that's a good...
Yeah.
Go ahead.
This with the screen, it's not only the dry eyes, but the myopia. I mean, in the normal population, not only the aniridia, is there a special concern about the aniridia patients that they have higher risk to have degenerative myopia too? Not only the dry eyes.
Does anyone know about...
Do they have higher risk than a normal population? Because then there are 2 factors that can affect.
Yeah. Is there anything known about the eye growth, axial length in specifically for aniridia? Do we know? I mean, I don't think. I mean, we know about myopia and.
They did some biometric analysis yesterday. I don't remember the result from Germany. There was a professor that presented. I don't remember the result, unfortunately. But in regards in what the mama said, that the child is supposed to use this screen with big letters. So maybe both the dryness but also the myopia gets worse.
Yeah.
So
I mean, and I think that is a general recommendation to limit the screen time and have breaks in that, looking at a far distance, looking out, being outside, of course, is great, especially in the childhood years. So really try to promote that, and that's good for everyone, aniridia or non-aniridia, especially in children. So keep that in mind, that myopia is also a big risk. Thank you.